Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I think we had a very successful weekend with the Mises Institute in town, and in spite of our governor, we even found a place where they could meet.
Yes.
And they had a full audience where they could have had twice as many people, but they did find one venue where they had it. And it was very exciting, and the weather was good. We didn't have to worry about that. So we had a nice weekend, a lot better weekend than some other people trying to deal with the virus. You know, we just didn't worry about the virus, so we did fine. But today there's more worry about the virus and what is going on and the election. Is the election over? Obviously not. Nobody's so sure who won. The Democrats are sure who won, and the Republicans aren't quite so sure. But you know, it's amazing how important it is to declare oneself a winner. And of course the Democrats said that Biden won, so everybody became very, very euphoric over the whole thing. But there's a long way to go. There's going to be a lot of discussion about what's going on. You know, I think that victory in elections are so relative. And even in my little talk yesterday with the Mises Institute, I talked about, the LBJ election. Yeah. And also it would include George Bush's, efforts in the Middle East. The victory seemed to be just fantastic. LBJ finally gets all this power, and he's going to end the war that was other people started. And of course, George Bush had it. But guess what? LBJ's whole foreign policy about Vietnam, it was based on lies. And the same thing with George W. Bush. His war was based on lies too, and both of those ended very badly for them individually. They lost all credibility. They participated in the death of many individuals, which was unnecessary if we had not been in those wars. And so right now, what's going to happen in foreign policy or wherever, but the war now is the war against ourselves, the war against the virus, the war against the people and the lockdown and these things going on. So there's a lot at stake. Probably the civil liberties are as vulnerable as they were even during wartime, but there certainly is a lot of concern. But this morning, we wake up and all of a sudden, wow, it looks like everything is okay. Stock market is soaring, up 1,700 points. The dollar is going up, way up compared to gold, which means people trust the dollar, and there's no major crisis in the world. So things on the surface look good, and Biden's there busy planning what to do, and make sure there's lockdown and whatever he thinks he can get away with. But it's really a big mess, and when you have to dissect this out and say, who really is winning this? We're suggesting that maybe the people who get to manufacture vaccines might be the winner. The people who's been advocating this system, and certainly there's two names that we've come to mind, and we've talked about them a lot, and that's Fauci and Gates. And they've been advocating this. But the question is, are they going to, ride along in their euphoria and say that they're winning this, they have the vaccine, everybody is happy, or will their reputation end up like LBJ's reputation and George W. Bush's reputation? They ended up, very low in the polls when the dust settled. So there's a lot to be sorted out, because quite frankly, I think the euphoric part of what's happening momentarily here, that there's no big, the markets are saying there's no big deal about the election. There might be a couple votes here and there, but it's not a big deal. Well, most people know a little bit about Donald Trump. He's probably not going to just walk away from this. And there's evidence popping up that there may well have been a lot of fraud. And if there was, he's not going to let it go. And I'm all for the investigation. I'm not that optimistic that all of a sudden these stories coming out to show how many votes probably were stolen will change things, because the deep state is still very, very powerful. I think the deep state's very much involved with this vaccine, and I think the vaccine euphoria is fake too. How do they know? 90% effective?
Yeah.
And I have some articles here that even the establishment over the last year warning about the vaccine and how difficult it was. Now the pandemic's over, and they're totally excited about this, but they're also talking, and I think the most important thing that I want to emphasize in what's happening right now is that they look like they have a vaccine, whether it's going to work or not, but they're talking about a mandated vaccine, and they're capable of that. If they can mandate and have little kids suffer through putting silly masks on their faces and halfway ruining some of their lives, I'll tell you what, they're capable of doing a lot of harm, and yet that's what is involved. And this mandated vaccine, I think, is very, very dangerous. And even some established people, you can even probably find Fauci saying some of the, since he's been on both sides of every issue, he's probably made the statements, how dangerous this is. But anyway, anything that requires mandates, whether it's Obamacare or getting a vaccine, I think is dangerous. It's a completely opposite to the libertarian solution of voluntarism. Don't be forced to do it. It's your life, and you're responsible. So a lot's up for grabs, and maybe in the next few days we'll find out, more with more certainty whether or not the Trump organization get the attention it deserves, at least some investigation. I think they should do it to set the record straight, to have it on the record, regardless, because I think it's going to be very difficult to overthrow, or if he gets sworn in, that's never taken care of. So it should be there, so at least people know, how this thing has occurred, because it should be helpful in the next generation. But we keep saying this. How come they keep doing this? They know these things that they're doing on mandates and lockdown aren't helpful, yet they still come out and think they're going to save the world with all their dictatorial powers.
Well, the idea of forced medical treatment is really something out of the Soviet Union. And unfortunately, the technology that we have today is so much more advanced in terms of tracking and tracing, prohibiting you from going to your job, forbidding you from going to school, forbidding you from having transactions at stores, et cetera, if you don't have this mandated vaccine, if it's mandated. This is not something that you see in a free society. If this vaccine is everything it's cracked up to be, people will line up to take it, those who wish to take it. And the whole theory behind the vaccine is such that if enough people line up to take it, that they hate to use this word, but there will be a herd immunity, that this vaccine, that the virus will be stopped in its tracks. But on the election, this is almost a week past the time that Americans voted. Some Americans voted many times probably, but we still really don't know, even though, of course, the mainstream media, including Fox, which very, very bizarrely, and we talked about this before, called Arizona for Biden before any votes were counted in the more conservative areas, and that sort of stopped the whole process, shut down the counting, and then overnight, thousands and hundreds of thousands of ballots in places like Wisconsin and Michigan were discovered, and they were 100% for Biden, which is really an anomaly, beyond an anomaly. It's incomprehensible. We have, Sidney Powell is the president, is helping the president out with these challenges, and she was on Fox. She was on with Maria Bartiromo yesterday, I believe, and she said they found 450,000 ballots that only have Joe Biden voted for. And that's something that doesn't happen. When people go vote, they'll vote for Biden, and usually the Democrat senator, some local people. But these are 450,000 ballots dumped with just Biden's name marked. Certainly raises huge questions. And then the Michigan software error using the Dominion voting systems, this software that mysteriously switched thousands of Trump votes to Biden, and then they found it and said, oh gosh, we're going to switch those back because they actually were for Trump. This Dominion voting system was used in 47 other counties in Michigan alone and up to 30 other states. So at the very least, regardless of who you supported for president, and we on this show, of course, supported no one for president, literally. You have to get to the bottom of this if you care about who won, if you care about the future of voting and of elections in the country, the integrity of elections. These things have got to be sussed out.
You know, there have been a few Democrats that have come into the open and started explaining, that have been aware of this. It's not like this is the first time this happened. They knew the process, and they described it very vividly. You know, if it's a tight race and they know about it, they have to somehow or another suspend the voting, take a pause on the voting, and they would typically wait till the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden these extra ballots would arrive and appear, and that's exactly what happened. But it's not like this is the first time it happened. But I imagine this has probably been one of the biggest examples of fraud, the number of votes that they've stolen, even though it's not the first time.
Yeah, not the first time. And this whole issue of suspending the counting for several hours and then mysteriously hundreds of thousands of votes coming in, all 100% for Biden in several different areas. But of course, I think it will be an uphill battle right now, because even if you identify fraud, it's hard to identify. We vote in anonymously. It's hard to identify which ballots and who will have done it. And of course, the main thing, and I've seen a lot of fraudulent elections as an observer, the main thing you have to do is get out, get ahead, and establish facts on the ground. And that is absolutely what Biden did. He had the entirety of the mainstream media behind him, established the facts on the ground, and also established that anyone questioning these things is a crazy conspiracy theorist and a kook who hates America. Interestingly enough, some of the things that we noticed that we criticize people for overseas. For example, remember over the weekend I read the U.S. statement on the elections in Belarus, which of course the U.S. doesn't recognize. One of the things that they point out, the U.S. points out, is that in Belarus they limited internet access and they used internet censorship to prevent people from expressing their concerns about the integrity of the vote. Well, that's exactly what's happening here. People are being banned from Facebook, banned from Twitter, not allowed to talk about it. Stories are being buried by Google. And we had one of the presentations from Professor Rechtenwald over the weekend talking about the CIA roots and origins of Google and Facebook and the others, the seed money coming from the CIA. So we have in spades in our country what we criticize other countries for with regard to elections.
You know, one of my simple solutions and phrases I use to solve some of our problems is, part of it is don't tell, people aren't allowed to tell lies.
Yeah.
Governments can't tell lies. But that's a big request, and you can't expect that to happen. Because just think of, I mentioned the wars, whether it was Vietnam or the Middle East, that was all based on lies. And here we've had lies dealing with the virus, a lot of mistakes, but a lot of lying too. And then the danger of the virus, that's an exaggeration, and that's been, fear, to build the fear mongering, that's based on a lie. And now also the lying about the election. It's all interrelated. So and it seems like the longer they go, the bigger the lies. And then of course people see this as shrewd politics. If you can lie and get away with it, you're not considered somebody who has committed some type of a moral crime. They're just considering the fact that they got away with it, and that is this. We live in a who's going to be believed? They're going to be challenged. The things you've cited already, it sounds so logical. And anybody who had any leanings toward honesty and toward Trump are going to say, we need to check this out. So that is the important. Bobulinski, I think, is the person we shouldn't forget.
Yeah, that's true.
He was on the air for a while, and Fox had him on. But we don't hear much about him now because they've sort of pushed that aside. That was irrelevant and proved it wasn't important in the election. But if we're looking for somebody, some of these things I thought that has to be true, but I'm not really at the point where I could legally prove what the people are saying and my instincts are. But Bobulinski, he was credible,
yeah.
And he really tied it together. At least he describes what the Biden family's like, and that should make you very suspect that they'll be quite capable of stealing an election.
Well, they wanted to stay out of the slammer is one of the reasons probably why they stole it. But Biden is hitting the ground running. He is not waiting. He's pretending he's president. already even pretending he's president. One of the things that he's done is he's already assembled his coronavirus task force. One of the people on his task force is Zeke Emanuel. He's the brother of Rahm Emanuel. Remember, never let a crisis go to waste? Zeke Emanuel is a big supporter of lockdowns. He's the one that said we need to stay locked down with mask mandates for 12 to 18 months. Of course, he's an oncologist, not an epidemiologist, but it only counts when it comes to Atlas if you're not an epidemiologist. But he's this is the Biden statement on the vaccine progress that is being hyped up big time. But this is interesting statement by President-elect, as they say, Joe Biden. Come down to here, and this is the real story, though, Dr. Paul. The third paragraph. This is why the head of the CDC warned this fall that for the foreseeable future, a mask remains the most potent weapon against the virus than the vaccine, a more potent weapon against the virus than the vaccine. So they're even downplaying the vaccine right now. Today's news does not change this urgent reality. Americans will have to rely on masking, distancing, contact tracing, hand washing, because we never did that before the virus. We're running around in our own filth. But that tells you the story. They really don't care that much about this vaccine at the point because the whole point is the mask mandate. Let's do this next clip really quick, Dr. Paul. I know you're going to be interested in this. Biden's first move as president-elect, mask mandate for all. And this is an article from FoxNews.com. Here's how he's going to do it. And it goes down. The way he's going to do it is he's going to work with governors. And it'll be interesting to see if Abbott rediscovers his spine when it comes to this. He's going to work with governors to get them to do it. And if that doesn't work, he'll go over their heads or under their heads and start dealing with mayors individually. So you may have a crazy patchwork in the U.S. It's almost like something out of Mad Max or something, where this city will have one, a hard one. And by the way, I was in Harris County yesterday, and it is like a lunatic asylum with people wearing masks in outdoor malls. But you're going to have this weird patchwork. You can do them, you sort of sneak over here where you can get by without a mask, and it's going to be a real mess.
See, I'm optimistic that the solution is going to be found on the people who enjoy the beach. But individuals who do like it, they want to go, they do go, they get a chance to go, they're back on the beaches in Florida, even in Texas, a few people are going out, and they don't want to go to the beach home with a mask on. So it's people willing to stand up on these principles, but unfortunately the intimidation is just horrible. And you know, the one example that I've mentioned to you is that we have one of our grandsons who's a first year medical student doing very, very well. And can you imagine? I've never talked to him about this, and I don't know. He just wants to study and be a doctor.
Yeah.
But can you imagine what's like? What if he gets to the point where he has a political instinct and he also ends up with a medical instinct that this is not good to take this virus or take the vaccine? What is he going to do? Does he lose his whole career in medicine, because of this? So, and that's the reason this vaccine is so dangerous. It is your passport, one way or the other. Whether they can automatically trace everything you do, or whether you have to just have a piece of paper. But it is a bad move. And I want to just mention. I mentioned it earlier, but there's a couple headlines on the people concerned about the vaccine. It's not like this is brand new and only you and I have been doing this and being concerned. A lot of people have been concerned, even for many, many years, because they've known of the complications. Of course, they've been all written off as kooks. But here's one, NIH, very concerned about the serious side effects of the vaccine. And here, date is September of this year, 2020. It's not like 10 years ago or something. Here, Supreme Court rules in favor of protecting vaccine makers. They get protection. You can't sue them, and that was pretty strongly supported by the Supreme Court. So, and also here's one here and this is from the Healthline. September again, why rushing a COVID-19 vaccine by November could be dangerous. But this is all pushed aside because this morning there is absolutely no danger. It's going to protect 90% of the people. They have no way of knowing that. And I bet when the dust settles, they're going to find out a lot more complications than they ever dreamed of, and they're going to find out it probably hasn't done any good. It probably won't. What are they going to measure it? The disease is disappearing so fast. Well, how are they going to give the vaccine? You know, all these curves that you show every day, it's disappearing. And and now we're going to give the vaccine, and the line will still stay there. See, we've taken care of it. No new outbreak from this. So it's a fraud. Is what they're doing. Just like fraudulent elections, this is a fraud. What they're doing, and it's tyranny, people who like to rule, but it's also money and people who are able to capitalize on this.
And I don't see tanks rolling down the streets, grabbing people out and putting shots in their arm. I think the way you pointed out is much more likely the way they will force vaccine, which is okay. You don't have to have it, but you can't go to school. You can't have your career. You can't do these things. You know, when the communists took over, the first thing they did was get rid of class enemies. So if your grandfather was a kulak, right? If he had a little business that he ran, you were not allowed to go to university. You were not allowed to study certain things. A very good friend of mine who lived under communism in Hungary had that same thing happen because his father had been a landowner. He was not allowed to study what he wanted. He had to study physical education. So this is the way they're going to do it. And if that doesn't work, it may come down to soldiers jamming things in your arms. But there's a long step between here and there, but it is a long road toward tyranny. I was going to swip over if you want to talk about the Biden. Did you have something that you want to talk about?
I just want to mention one more thing, and this is a sign of optimism, but it's a disappointment because we don't have rallies quite this big, unless they're at the Trump rally. This is a rally in Leipzig, and millions, like hundreds of thousands anyway, who are complaining against the lockdown.
Yeah.
And then there was another one in Germany, I believe. No, this is UK. To denounce the national lockdown. But they keep doing it. The government keeps doing it. The people are speaking out, but ultimately, you know, you need philosophic leaders. You need people understanding what's going on. But ultimately, the people have to stand up because the saying is that bad governments can't exist without the support of the people. Yeah, they get lulled into it and they go along with it and they survive, but ultimately they have to have the support coming from the people. And I think when you see crowds like this coming out, we just need more of them. That's why we've talked so much about the crowds in the Florida beaches.
Yeah.
We need more of that. People standing up because that means that they want their liberties and they're not intimidated. They're not saying there's no danger in being exposed to other people, bad colds, and even what about the flu virus? Has been around a long time. That's probably caused a lot more problems, every year. But they've taken care of that problem. Nobody dies from influenza anymore.
Well, the CDC announced that because of the ongoing COVID crisis, they're not even going to track influenza this season. They're not even going to bother.
Just add them on.
Yeah, just add them on. They're not going to bother. Well, the people who do feel ripped off that their vote has been stolen, if these people do start to wake up and get out in the streets and demonstrate as the Europeans are doing, it doesn't take, as you always said, it doesn't take 50% plus one. It doesn't take 20% even. But a lot of people in the streets will convince the people who are trying to take away their liberties to think twice because there will be repercussions for that.
Right.
Well, I wanted to just, my good friend Colonel McGregor sent a great article from Forbes over. These are the 5 executive orders that are expected to be issued by Biden, boom, pronto, right away, first day perhaps. And I'll go through them and see what you think about them. And we haven't rehearsed this in advance, so we're going to wait for your reaction. First of all, Paris Climate Accord. Rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. $2 trillion will be spent on clean energy and infrastructure. Massive subsidization of the so-called clean energy. 0 emissions by 2020. He said in the debate, of course, that he wants to get rid of oil. Number 2, rejoin the World Health Organization. Coronavirus will be a top priority for the administration. 3, repeal Trump's travel ban on people from certain Muslim countries. 4, reinstate the Dreamers program, and that's the program that allows children of illegal immigrants to remain in the U.S. and have a path towards citizenship. And 5, repeal the military transgender ban and perhaps appoint someone to a high military position who is a transgendered, whatever they call it. So this is the 5 things that he's going to apparently do when he hits the ground. I think probably the climate stuff is the most important.
Yeah, and that's easier to put this in the perspective of what you can do or can't do. I don't like the international government organizations because there's more politics involved, and that's what that would be. And it's always done unfairly. So Trump is, very correct in making a point of this, that when we get in there, we end up paying more of the bills. But it's also the principle that through regulations and dictatorships and government, the government has a responsibility in that if people destroy the property or the environment, the air or the water of other people, governments have responsibilities. And libertarians should be very, very good. A very good libertarian, they are very good environmentalists because they understand that's an act of aggression to destroy property. But unfortunately, people resort to the fact that no, you have to have international government. You say, well, how's it going to work? If you had that system in the United States, we would do a pretty good job, and we have done a better job. But how's that going to help with China? Well, you don't have to have an international agreement and think that you can sign on a dotted line with the Chinese and everybody's going to follow it. But that doesn't mean you can't work with people, and maybe things improve between countries when you have voluntary arrangements and trade agreements, and there can be pressure. Some people might just quit buying China, if they think they're, such great polluters. But this is an effort to decide, whole idea that you just have to get this monetary policy.
Yeah.
It's the IMF and the World Bank, and all we have to do is put this together, and that'll solve the problem. These arrangements, but it has to be done in a voluntary way. But you have to protect property. Even if you want to start talking about First Amendment rights, well, you have to be doing is talking about property. Property doesn't come by picking and choosing what you can say like they do on social media.
Yeah.
That's insane. But the property will determine that. So I would assume, I don't know, well, we've been challenged here. I was going to say here, we have private property right here. You and I are, participating in this, and we pay our own bills, and people can listen to us if they want or turn us off if they want. And we don't get subsidies from the government.
Yeah.
But it's the property. That doesn't mean that, the government has the right to come in that door and tell you what you can say or shut you off if you're not saying the right thing. So much of this, whether it's the environment or First Amendment rights, whether it's monetary policy, usually can be solved if you emphasize voluntarism and property.
Well, I'm going to move toward closing then,
Okay.
if you're there. And I just want to, first of all, announce to our super chatters, we had a technical glitch this morning. It didn't give us 450,000 new super chatters, unfortunately, but it did unfortunately prevent us from thanking you publicly as we do every Monday. So as soon as we get that sorted out, we'll roll the credits, thanking you for participating and helping us keep the show alive. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll have it by tomorrow if we can do that. My final thing, Dr. Paul, is turn up this next clip. And this is going to be the order of the day. New Jersey orders indoor dining halt. Phil Murphy just announced among the latest batch of restrictions to slow the spread of COVID-19 in the Garden State will be an order barring indoor dining between 2200 and 0500. It'll be a late dinner anyway, but still, that's the first initial additional restriction on the people of New Jersey. So you're thinking, wow, second wave, they must be dropping on the Atlantic City must be a graveyard. Well, let's look at the actual numbers from New Jersey. I just picked these up this morning. Do this next one. Look at this. Here's the great second wave in New Jersey. Don't go to a restaurant. Small businesses, medium businesses, family businesses, you're going to go out of business because they're dropping in the streets. But wait, they're not. Nothing is happening. You're having an increase in positive tests. And people are being tested, of course, 5, 6, 7 times. I was just talking to someone who knows someone who does stunt work for the movies. And to do one day of stunt work, and this is true throughout Hollywood, you have to fly to a place, you have to sequester, you're tested before you fly, you're tested again before you go on to the to the stage to do the work. You're tested again when you're done, and you're tested when you get back home. So these are 4 tests. What if all 4 were false positives? You know, this is the kind of thing we're seeing. So anyway, cracking down again, and the numbers don't justify it.
On a test that even Fauci said at one time, it's not worth anything.
No, not worth it, exactly.
What a shame. And you were talking about numbers. I'd like to once again express my appreciation to our viewers, because in this last week, maybe even in a little less than a week, we had 5,000 new people sign up with our channel. And that to me is very, very helpful. Gives us a lot of encouragement. And no, it's not 240,000, it's just 5,000, but 5,000 is very good for us, because when you look at it, you know, getting over 250,000 is significant, because we go for quality and we have a lot of enthusiasm. And just think, if each one of those individuals who are into understanding this can just spread a message. I just wonder, Daniel, how many names might we reach, you know, if social media closes us down? How many people can we admit, if everybody that watches this program uses their email list to help us spread a message? You know, maybe if they did that, maybe they could double our list in a few days. But once again, we take this very seriously. We do our very best to get the news, and be very very determined to make sure that we report it accurately. But we can't do it without support. If we only had 10 people out there, well, I'd probably still do it, but because I used to do it for 10 people. But now I think it's still encouraging, in spite of all these shortcomings with politics and all the shortcomings with the media and the internet and everything else. I still think that it's a worthwhile venture, because I do believe that truth does win out, and it happens. It doesn't happen immediately. It won't happen today. The truth is not going to be known about this election. But I really am a stickler for record what's going on, because hopefully somebody later on will look at it and say, you know, the direction we should have gone is this way, and what were the people saying about it? So I do think recording this, but once again, we do know that the authoritarians, what's the first thing that they do when they're concerned about their movement? They alter history. So our job is to try to produce current events as honestly as we can, to hopefully influence the people in the future and say, historically, look at how goofy they did. They did this, this, and this, never worked. All these excuses for the war that were used because it was necessary for national security, and it fails, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people die from our stupid foreign policy, and yet they keep repeating it over and over again. And it'll be a big challenge now, because Biden is not going to make the effort anything close to what Trump made. Although he was imperfect on that foreign policy as a libertarian goes, but he still made an honest effort to bring more troops home and not start any more big wars. He was not LBJ, and he wasn't George W. Bush. So I once again want to thank all our viewers today for tuning in and providing support for us. Please come back soon to the Liberty Report.